Hello, and welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
This is the podcast about murders and so much more. We will talk about anything strange, anything that goes bump in the night, and pretty much anything that amuses us.
And on that note, we need to mention that this podcast is not safe for work or delicate ears, so do be discerning who you listen to it with.
We also want to let you know that you can find us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram, so look for us there.
I am Shannon Lawrence. I am a writer, mom, wife, student, procrastinator, and you can find me at thewarriormuse.com.
My name is MB Partlow. I am a writer, an avid reader, an organizer extraordinaire, a mom to kids, cats, and a dog, and I call bullshit when I see it.
Okay.
Hello, and welcome to a very special episode of Mysteries, Monsters.
What's so special about it?
I just liked it that when they used to do it, you knew it was going to be about something like your parents are divorcing when they said, stay tuned for a very special episode.
It's like Roseanne.
Yeah,
and it was going to be very dramatic.
Somebody's going to die.
There's going to be suicide involved. Something like that. Yeah. That's
teen
true.
pregnancy.
Yes.
Something. A very
Divorce.
special episode of
A mother who's addicted to Valium. Like, that was big in the 80s. I remember thinking Valium was like a really big problem when I was like a preteen because it was always in the after school specials, and the child that got into trouble and had, I don't know, bulimia or whatever they were covering that week is because their mom was addicted to Valium. It's terrible. But
and you know what? I know it's a meme. I know it's a stupid meme, but I've always thought I've never been offered drugs to the amount that I would expect given all the after-school specials. They made it sound like people were driving around in vans, chucking it out of the windows. No.
So frankly, I was offered a lot of drugs, but but no, probably not to the extent of
But for a certain period of time.
Yeah.
And then it just stopped.
Well, yeah, then I got older. It's not happening now. Nobody's offering me anything now. Unless it's oil of Olay. Here, we have this great diet product. That's what I'm getting thrown at me now. It's kind of drug, right? Like, here's a great diet product. Drink this. It's ads now. Nobody has to offer it to me personally.
It's like I said, it used to be in a bar, men would buy me drinks because I'm cute.
Yeah.
Now they buy me drinks because they're afraid of me. And I'm like, if the end result is free drinks, I'm okay with that.
Bring them on. We had a little action last night. Well, so our cat,
we did.
Athena, not that kind of action. I'm going to talk about that. But
that's not. This is not that
my
podcast.
cat, Athena.
Yes.
Is one of the kittens, but not, she's just a kitten compared to the other two cats. So she disappeared. Let me see. Friday.
What?
Early evening. And so we hadn't let her out. We still know. They know how to open the screen or whatever. So she must have gotten out. But so we didn't know if she was missing in the house or out of the house. So last night she was still missing. And so Savannah, a girl child, she didn't want to go downstairs. She wanted to sit up and wait for Athena. And
Aww.
we were searching the whole house because we kept hearing a meow. Her meow is very distinctive. All the cats meows. But we couldn't find her. I looked for her Friday night, looked for her Saturday night. So we even went into the utility room to see if there was duct work that she got into, because cats can do that. But I went for a walk along the surrounding streets and called for her. Nothing. Aww. No cats. So we're like, what the hell? So finally at 2 a.m. that little butthead shows up and just meows at the back door, and she's covered in dirt, and her sister Persephone is following her around, just doing that cat thing where they open their mouth and smell like, because they're really taking it in. And I'm like, what do you smell like that she can smell and I can't? All I know is she was so dirty and dusty that Savannah and I were sneezing after we picked her up.
I would be happy I couldn't smell that, whatever it was.
Right? So we have no idea where she was. It was longer than 24 hours that little jerk was missing. She just walked in, sauntered past me, went into the cat food and ate some cat. I'm like, yeah, hungry.
Had a cigarette.
Jackass.
Lit a cigarette.
That's right. So that was our drama for the last 2 days.
That's awful.
But speaking of which, so because you mentioned in the last episode about Nefertiti. Oh. So my cat, this is the cat that I bitch about all the time on here, because let me just say.
She's the one you hear.
Yes. And eventually I'm going to put these cut scenes together for you people. And then you can hear her scratching at the door like a psycho and meowing. So she has a lot of personality. She's a Siamese cat. They often have a lot of personality. Mm-hmm. She's a tortoiseshell point Siamese. So she has that mix of like calico colors in her oranges. And people keep asking me if she's a chimera. She's not. It's just the calico point, but it's because half of her face is gray. So they think that she's that specific chimera where it's like they have one blue eye here and one.
Oh, wow.
They're split between. She's not. It's just how the pattern worked out. But anyway, so we had gone out with a friend and you were dropping me back off.
And as usual, we sit in the
for like an hour.
And talk.
And so I opened my door and, first of all, the door was closed.
And so I'm sitting there talking to Shannon. You'd gotten out of the car, I think.
Okay, yeah, and I was like stooped over talking to you.
Yeah, you were standing there talking to me. Was I in the minivan?
Nope, car. You were in Joe's car.
So I see something flash by my vision on the left. She's very white. So I turn to look because I think it's a cat, and I'm getting ready to leave, and I want to know where the cat is because I really don't want to run over anybody's cat, but I really don't want to run over my cats. So I turn and I press my face against I'm leaning over like you all can see me doing that. So I lean and I'm pressing my face up against the window so I can try to see where the cat went, and the cat leaps onto the window like spread eagled, like a fucking face hugger. Like
it just hits the window.
Hits the window.
I was like, was that Nuffy? Because I hadn't seen what she was looking at.
And I'm like, excuse me, I have to go home and change my pants now.
But then she circles over. And I was talking to her or whatever. And then she jumps in the car. And then she starts doing her claws in there. I'm like, no, we're not going to do that in somebody's car. So then she just runs over onto MB's lap. And so you lower your window.
It looks at me like, bitch, put the window down.
So she does.
I can follow a direct order.
And Nuffy doesn't just jump out. She climbs out and steps on your mirror and walks over onto the windshield. And so we're just watching her, you watch a cat and get their paws are against the glass. And she sits there for a minute on your windshield. Then she climbs up to the top and she lays down and she rests for a minute. And she's a hurricane. That's why I bitch about her on her. She's adorable and I love her, and she's a little love sponge and she loves the snuggles, and she's pretty much...
But she's also insane.
But she's absolutely insane and so full of personality and such a handful, which, we always choose... Admittedly, we choose the one with personality when we go into the Humane Society. And so we always end up... with these cats. Our first cat, we had Gen 1 and Gen 2 for our marriage, okay? Because we got our first kitten when we were living in our first apartment together before we moved to Oregon and got married. And we had to sneak the kitten in. And it turned into all these problems. Because then they told us that we had cats, but the cat they described, we had a little orange tabby. They were like, we saw the black cat in your window. And we were like, there's no... We didn't have a cat. I wanted to be like, our cat's orange. The problem is that we left because I was 18 and we were both 18 when we were living there because he turned 19 right before we got married. But so we started letting his dad deal with it because we were moving out of state and we were busy, and his dad did it. He said that their cat isn't black. And so we lost. So we didn't get our deposit back. But anyway, the people above us did have cats. I would hear them running around all the time. So they actually held their cats against us.
What was funny was when I was young and single and living in apartments, it was always there are no pets allowed. And everybody snuck their cats. Yeah. Everybody had a cat or two. And now my children are very law abiding, and they're like, no, the lease says I can't have pets. Right. I'm like, well, that's more of a suggestion, isn't it? Really?
Isn't it? As long as you hide the evidence. That was when I learned not to bother scrubbing down an apartment as thoroughly as I do, though, by the way, when we moved out. Because after that, we got screwed every time. Even when we told them that we had pets.
My last apartment in Virginia Beach, they tried to... when I left that apartment, I moved to Colorado. Mm-hmm. And my roommate, Ellen, she was still in Virginia Beach. So, unfortunately... Fortunately for me, unfortunately for her, she had to deal with a landlord. So we never saw our landlord. We theorized that he was in prison because we only dealt with the secretary at the office. But they said they weren't going to give us our deposit back because the bathtub was cracked. What the do you think we were doing in there? It was cracked when we moved in. So we hunted down the last tenant and got him to give us a statement.
Nice.
That it was cracked when he moved in.
Every single time we had something, because we were young, and every single time they would hold something new against us, and we would fight, and then we would give up, because then they'd say, well, let's take it to small claims court. You're welcome to, whatever, and they'd threaten, and we could have won, because I learned very fast to take pictures when we moved in.
Oh, yes.
And take pictures when we moved out. But were we willing to go to small claims court? We didn't have that much money. So we just never did. But anyway, it was like, and in the last one that we rented before we moved in with my parents for it was less than a year, and we just paid everything off and put all our money in savings that we were making, and then we bought our first house. So we had a down payment. That last one, they even screwed us because my husband's so handy. They would frequently, once they got to know it, they would expect him to just fix things, and maybe they'd buy us a part or whatever. So the last one, we said, do you want us to patch holes or anything? Because, they paint after everybody moves out. Each apartment gets repainted. Yeah. And so the property manager we worked with all the time, because somebody just owned a bunch of properties and they had a management company take care of it. He said, go ahead and patch them, do the basic, and then we will be painting over it, so that's fine. Don't bother doing that part. Then, between the day he tells us this on the phone, not in writing, nothing, a lot wasn't done by email then, but one of his parents dies and he takes off. So a new person from the property management comes in. He comes in, inspects it, and says, well, you're not supposed to patch the holes. We said, Mike or whatever his name was, told us to, still fucking charged us for it. So we had gone and bought the material to do that. And let me tell you, it was quality patchwork. They did not have to do it over again. My husband is good at this shit. He's been doing it forever.
Yeah.
So again, they still managed to screw us at the end. And by that time, believe me, I was writing down the minutest speck on a wall. I would turn in the document they gave you that you filled in, good shape, bad shape. I had extra papers on there. I described everything wrong because, and they still, every single fucking time, managed to keep at least some of our deposit.
When Thing 2 moved into her dorm the first year, and they're like, just sign this piece of paper. And I went, I don't think so. And I wrote everything down, and I was like, and I took a picture of it, or I had her take a picture of it, because I'm like, we're not paying for damage we didn't do. Now, if you do damage, we'll have to pay, but I'm not paying for, and I'm just going to say, University of Arkansas at Little Rock does shit to maintain their dorms. Oh, yeah. They don't clean in between.
Oh.
You have to clean when you move out, and they don't have like a crew come through and clean before the next people come in.
That's disgusting.
Unless you have left it so bad. And if you've left it so bad, they have to have somebody come in and clean it. They charge you.
Yeah.
I mean, oh my God,
we literally had one of our landlords. Ooh, I was like, I'll say her name. But then I'm like, nah, don't do it. Leave her. Bitch. Anyway. She was apparently friends with the people who moved in next to us. And so she sent us some letters. She's like, you're not getting your deposit back because you called the cops on the neighbors. Well, because they would fight violently. And one night, shit hit the wall. We thought that they were killing each other. So we called the cops. Now, people should know we did not have any money and we were living in bad neighborhoods. And that's the type of neighbors that we had. And she used that. And we were like, so what's your problem with that? We thought he was killing her.
How could you say this? Yeah, that doesn't make any sense at all.
And then she was like, we know that you made noise when you were moving out to bug them back or what. They were awful neighbors, but we were working all the time anyway. So I think she was friends with them because obviously they told her that we'd called the cops on them. But it was the only time we did too. All their fighting, we dealt with all of that noise. And then we called the cops when we thought that he was killing her. But she sent us this letter and she very carefully worded. She was... she was a trash lord, and that was what she was used to. She probably screwed everybody, but here's what she claimed. See, she had this little shed on the property. It was two sets of row houses that faced each other. And she had this little shed with a slot, and you put your rent in there each month. So I put my notice in there, and then That was when I learned that when you give notice at an apartment or a rental of any sort, you send it by registered mail. Because she then claimed that we turned in the notice late, so she was going to keep it, but we didn't. I didn't. You know me.
Oh, yes, I do.
I was like this when I was a teenager, too. So
you have attention to detail, especially when it comes to money.
You bet. But we couldn't prove her wrong because we had not sent it. So after that, registered mail for notice. I learned something every damn time, and it's amazing. These people that do this, the slumlords, they know what they're doing. They've practiced it. They've learned from what they've done to their previous tenants, and they're going to get you every time because they want to keep your money.
Yeah, they do.
Oh, it's awful. I will never, if I can help it, rent again. No. There are people that prefer renting. I've talked to those people. There's plenty of them out there, and they prefer renting.
I was a happy renter.
Oh my God, no. But I also have an overblown sense of justice, so it wasn't going to go well.
Do you?
I know I hide it well.
You are awful closed off and reluctant to speak your mind.
That upsets me.
No, hardly ever. It's like you have to pull it out. It's like you have to get pliers and pull it out.
I'm never mad. I was just kidding when I said that when the Hulk, I remember just being like, it was this weird sense of relief when the Hulk in the movie says, when they ask him how he can pull that up when he needs to, and he says, the secret is I'm always angry. And I was like, oh my God, so am I. That's amazing. I feel like somebody understands me, even if it is the Hulk. It's always simmering there under the surface. All right, so let's talk about what we read. Because you haven't watched Jack. I'm still going to talk about what I watched. Okay.
I have to check things off because I've started writing them down now. Because I forget.
Yeah, we both have our list now.
We do. So last time I talked about this crazy ass funny space opera by Barry J. Hutchison. But what I wanted to say was, I found him because my sister-in-law said to me, "You need to read this mystery series by J.D. Kirk." So I was like, "All right." You know me. I'm very hard to get to read a new book. Here, read this. All right. Well, it's this series set in the Scottish Highlands. It's police procedural. It's really, really good. The character building is outstanding. The most recent one I read was The Killing Code. It's the third book in the series. Okay. The first one was good. The second one was good. The third one, it's like, holy shit, something kicked into gear. Okay. And it was outstanding.
Well, they were getting better at it.
Yeah, but I didn't realize she said, oh yeah, he wrote some sci-fi something under his real name. So that's how I found the Hutchinson books. That's his real name.
Oh, okay.
And I can't in my head reconcile these kind of madcap, farcical space capers and these very serious, set in the Scottish Highlands procedurals.
I hope to one day have that array.
Wouldn't that be lovely?
I'm interested in.
So, what have you read anything?
I read Claws of the Cat, a shinobi mystery. I think there's 7 out now by Susan Spann. So,
I know that name.
Yes, she's even though she doesn't live here anymore, she's part of the local writing community. She now lives in Japan.
Oh wow!
And so she's a cancer survivor. She wrote a book, and she was going to climb a certain number of peaks over there. And she did, while recovering from this intensive chemo. Such respect for her. It's crazy. I did finally buy her memoir. I have not read it yet, but it's the one where she was climbing the peaks, and it's a memoir. I'm looking forward to reading it.
Nice.
I've wanted to get it for a while, but I finally did. But this is her first mystery. And the thing about her is she knows Japanese culture. So the main character, it's an interesting blend because the main character he's samurai. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so she's got this characterization. This is set back a different time, but he is sworn to protect this priest then. White dude, I forget where he's from, if he's Italian or some other European, but So he's sworn to protect him. He's a Jesuit priest. So they have these conversations and they're kind of, you're learning about both, and they get into this bad situation where somebody has threatened to kill the Jesuit priest because he's protecting somebody who they suspect killed this other person who's well respected. And so it's an honor thing. I mean, there's a lot of things that come into play that are cultural. But anyway, it's really good. Great. It's the first one that she did, Claws of the Cat. And I haven't read the rest yet, but it's a good series.
I was going to say, it sounds like it.
Yeah.
I read, have you heard of, I somehow, when this came out, it escaped me. If It Bleeds by Stephen King.
I haven't read it yet. I've heard of it.
4 novellas. Mm-hmm. Like, I can't remember the one that The Green Mile was in. No, not The Green Mile. He did a book before that was like 4 novellas. They're too long to be short.
There's several of them.
Yes.
But it's like 4:15 or something has 4 novellas in it, something like that.
This one came out in 2020. So, gee, I can't imagine how I missed it. I missed everything in 2020. But it's all 4 are just really good. The one that stuck with me, I wrote down the name of it, Mr. Hannigan's Phone. And it's this kid who makes friends with like this reclusive guy who lives in the big mansion on the hill. And for some reason, he ends up giving the guy, the guy's always giving him scratchers, lottery tickets. And he wins some money, so he buys himself. He really wants an iPhone. That's all he wants. He wants a cell phone. He wants an iPhone. So he gets one, and then, he's growing up. He's getting older. He's a teenager. He saves up his money, and he buys Mr. Hannigan one. Oh. And the guy initially doesn't want one, but the kid is like, let me show you something. And so the guy used to be in the stock market, so he shows him how he can access that. And so it's a really nice build of the relationship between the two of them.
He does that well, especially often, apt pupil.
Yes. But the story takes a turn, but gets really interesting after Mr. Hannigan dies.
Okay.
So that's all I'm going to say about that. It was so good. I was like, this needs to be a whole novel, not just a novella.
I've always enjoyed his shorter works.
Yes.
I liked all his stuff, but I really enjoyed the shorter works. He does it very well.
He really does. He gets you right into, you feel like you're there.
He's magnificent at like character and setting and just fully, yeah.
And he does it so simply. It's not like it's spare, because his writing is not spare, but you don't realize, you never think, oh, he's going to set up the emotional state of this character. He just does it.
Yeah.
And you immediately it's not just that you get what they're feeling, you feel what they're feeling.
Yeah.
He's so brilliant at that.
He's brilliant at a lot of things. As much as people like to mock him because of how mainstream he is, he's really got a lot of things down. And there's a reason that he became as big as he is. Yes. Even they can make all the jokes they want. They're not Stephen King. So there's a big thing in the horror community. It's like either you love him or you want to mock him. And it's like, guess what? If you're mocking him, we all know you're jealous. So calm down. But yeah, I need to read it.
You do.
Yeah.
Everyone does.
Okay. I'm going to talk about what I watched.
Okay.
Now, first of all, have you watched Dairy Girls?
No.
No,
I've heard of it.
You would enjoy it. It's on Netflix because it's these what are they, Irish students.
Irish, yeah.
And it's back. Here's what I find fascinating, and I know I talk about this with various things all the time. Right? Is when they can bring in a part of history or a cultural history. So this isn't set now. It's set during like the NRA issues. So there's stuff like this road is shut down because there's a probable bomb from the
God. Okay.
Yeah. So, but it's background because the show itself is a comedy, but this is happening in the background, so it plays into a couple episodes. But yeah, it's just they just get in so much trouble. And one of them, her poor little British male cousin, it's an all-girls school, and his mom somehow gets him enrolled so that he can go with the cousin. And so he's the only boy in this all-girl school. And he's from England, and they're in Ireland during this time frame. So everything is like making fun of him and all of this. But the first episode that he's like, what bathroom can I use? And they're like, there's no men's rooms. And that's all they'll tell him. And so he just has to pee so bad all day. And then it builds until it comes to joke fruition, which I'm not going to go into. But yeah, it's really funny. It's a clever show.
Huh.
Yeah, I watched it one way through. And then like I put the first episode on for Jeff to show him. And then we started watching it. So then I started watching it a second time through kind of with him. Because it's funny. They're just trouble. They just...
Well, I will check it
trouble
out.
Trouble follows them. They're not bad. They're just,
Yes.
As can be true of teenage girls.
Yes.
In any case.
Yes.
And then I watched a couple movies on Hulu. So the first one, it was one of those things and it was like, for people interested in horror. And I went, what the hell? And it was called Blood Moon. But it's this single mom traveling around with this little boy. And you have the implications, right? One of them is something. One of them is maybe a werewolf.
Oh.
Ooh. And then it builds and builds and builds. And then you find out the werewolf is the child, which is not really a spoiler because I'd already guessed that when it came. And it's not about that. It's a bit of a drama. It's a very quiet horror film, but that's more about the drama. It's maybe more of a thriller or whatever. So yeah, you follow that because she has to keep moving because mishaps happen. And she has to, in every town, build somewhere to trap him.
How old is he?
He's like 9 something.
Okay.
He's a kid.
So not like a 4-year-old, but not like a...
Right. Still young enough to basically have that natural sociopathy that kids have where they don't understand why they can't go to the birthday party on the full moon.
Yes.
So perhaps they sneak out to it.
Oh.
Yeah. So anyway, it was a really good film. It was really well acted. It was quiet.
Nice.
It's on Hulu. It's just a good... And then after that, a comedy popped up and I was like, sure. Why not? So it's called Plan B. Totally inappropriate. There is full frontal nudity on a guy. It is so freaking funny though.
What
Plan
is it
B.
about?
So it's these 2 teenage girls and one of them, she's really interested in this guy. And so she somehow her mom's going to be out of town for a day and she sets up, all right, well, let's have a party because she's talking to him. And then it just kind of comes up sporadically betwixt the two of them. And so it amused me in the beginning because you get introduced to both girls and they're best friends. And the one, she's Indian and her mom, she just lives with her mom. So it's just the two of them. And I'm not talking Native American because they don't typically use that term for that. So just to be clear, they're from India. And so she's got her mom is very strict. She has to dress. She basically dresses like a little girl still as a teenager because her mom is like, here's what you can wear. And mom takes care of her. And then you got the other girl and she's Latina and she's living with her dad and her brothers. Okay. So she doesn't have a mom. And like she comes in and she's all punked out. Here's her best friend who dresses like a little girl still. And then here it doesn't wear makeup and stuff. And then here's her and she's got her hair all done up. She's got all this makeup on. And her dad's sitting there. I recognized him from something, but I don't know his name. I recognize him from a lot of things. Yeah.
I think I've seen an ad for
it. It's funny. So, and he's like, every time you sit at this table, like you've gotten crazier looking. And she says, Jesus wore a dress and nobody judged him. And he goes, everybody judged him. They crucified him. Because he's like super Catholic or whatever. So that was just like, I was like, okay, I think I'm going to like this. And then it goes, she has sex at the party, the girl who is Indian. And they're trying to get Plan B. And it's just this awkward, it just can't happen. And they're on a mission. They got to drive to another city. And then all this shit goes down. And there's mishaps everywhere. And it's just such a mess. And it's inappropriately funny. And I like an inappropriately funny movie. And yeah. So again, that one's on Hulu too. I recommend both of those.
Nice.
They're both really good. And they're both simple. Like that. I don't even know if they came out in movie theaters. I think they were maybe direct to Hulu. And yet still very well made.
I will say what I'm looking forward to. Because it starts tonight. Loki.
Like with what's his butt?
Yes, with Tom Hiddleston on Disney Plus. It's a series.
What the fuck? I didn't even hear about this at all, and I love him.
That's why
I love a trickster god.
Right? And you know who else is in it?
Who?
Owen Wilson.
Oh!
I love him.
Well, we're going to be watching this.
With that crazy crooked ass
that Disney Plus is putting out Hocus Pocus 2?
Yes.
I think in the fall, which would make sense.
Well,
probably around October, don't you think? No, I had had no idea. I haven't even... Why did I hear about stupid Falcon and Winter Soldier that I could not give less of a shit about? And I didn't hear about Loki. He's my favorite.
I cannot... Well, yeah. Duh.
I'm so upset right now. I'm
so glad I remembered to bring it up.
I am glad. I'm taking Boy Child and to go meet up with my sister and see Quiet Place 2 tonight.
Ooh.
Because he wanted to, I was like, is there anything you want to see? I thought they might want to see Mortal Kombat and they didn't want to.
Tell me what you think of that, because you really liked the first movie.
I did, and you didn't like it as much.
I did like it, but it was one of those, for me, it was one of those movies that I was totally absorbed in it while I was watching it. And then as soon as it was over, I started going, but...
Yeah.
I was like...
Whereas when I watch something, like if I take in horror, at the end, I'm trying to analyze what they did right, and you were looking at what they did wrong, and I was like, okay, but they did so well with so much silence.
Yes.
To make this movie with such an impact. See? Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to hear the bad. Don't talk to me.
All right, so I'm going to talk about the murder of Irene Garza.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of Irene?
I don't know. It doesn't come directly to mind.
So a lot of my information came off of Wikipedia, and I also got some off of CBS News.
Okay.
So for me, this is a long one.
Yeah.
So because it made me just shake my fist.
Ooh, there's going to be a lot of fist shaking today, just so people know then.
Sorry.
Mine too.
So Irene Garza was born in 1934 in McAllen, Texas, which is extreme southern Texas. Her parents owned a successful dry cleaning business. And despite the white majority at her high school, she was the first Latina to become a head drum majorette. Mm-hmm. She was crowned the 1958 Miss All South Texas Sweetheart. That's a mouthful. And later was a homecoming queen at Pan American College. So she was an achiever. At the age of 25, she was still living at home with her parents. She was teaching second grade. She really loved her job. She got a great deal of fulfillment from her job. She felt like she was making a difference. They have a letter she wrote to a friend at this time.
So sad. Yeah. Now you're going to tell us something sad.
Oh, yeah, I am. Yes, she'd recently become secretary of the Parent Teacher Association.
Oh, Lord.
The end.
Oh, Lord.
She was a devoted Catholic. She was a member of the Legion of Mary, which is a charitable organization within the church, and she attended daily mass and communion. Daily. Wow. I'm like, I know some religious people,
that's some dedication.
That's some dedication. That's some deep belief. So, Saturday, April 16th, 1960, she told her parents she was going to confession at Sacred Heart Church. And because she was a fairly strikingly attractive young woman, people noticed her where she went. Several people remember seeing her at Mass. When she didn't return, seeing her at confession, when she didn't return home, her parents assumed she had stayed for midnight Mass. That was not unusual. When she hadn't returned by 3 a.m., they went to the police and reported her missing. So this is 3 a.m. This is Sunday morning. It may have even been Easter Day.
Okay.
So on Monday, so that was Saturday into Sunday morning. On Monday, someone found her purse, her left shoe, and her lace veil, like going down a back road. And I assume by the veil they meant because in those days, if you were Catholic, women had to wear a head covering. Mm-hmm. So instead of wearing a hat, a lot of them had a specific little lace veil they would pin on. I don't know why I know this. I know
a lot more about religion than I should.
Yes. So police and volunteers started at the time it was the biggest search effort ever in southern Texas, to find her. So on Thursday, her body was discovered in a canal. The official report said she had died of suffocation, and while unconscious, she had been raped and beaten. And unfortunately, the time that she spent in the canal washed away a lot of trace evidence. Mm-hmm. Not that in 1960 they would have been, pulling the DNA, but anything that there was gone. So this was a huge deal. Not that it wouldn't be today, but law enforcement questioned something in the neighborhood of 500 people. including family members, ex-boyfriends, co-workers. I mean, pretty much everyone she knew was questioned. They performed 50 polygraph exams, and that will be important later. Law enforcement offered a $2,500 reward for information, and South Texas business owners got together and raised another $10,000 that they offered as a reward. So one of the people under suspicion who was questioned was the 27-year-old priest who heard her confession. So Father John, I'm going to say Feit. It's F-E-I-T. Mm-hmm. So we're going to go with Feit. His confession line had moved very slowly that day at the church, and he had left the sanctuary several times. When the canal was drained, and it wasn't drained immediately, but it was a couple of days after her body was found, they discovered one of his personal possessions in the canal. It wasn't like under the body, but it was in the canal, and it had no reason to be there. More damning, fellow priests saw scratch marks on his hands after the midnight mass, and it was reported that Feit took Irene to the church rectory to hear her confession. Mm-hmm. Although, and the other priest said there was no reason for that to happen.
Nope.
There was absolutely no reason for it.
There's confessionals.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Why take her to where you live? Mm-hmm. So I'm like, this explanation is not, anyway. Although I understand at the time there was a lot of hesitation to suspect even someone who
there
was...
still is.
Yeah, a man of the cloth.
Yeah, whatever.
His explanation was that while he was listening to confession, he would take off his glasses and fiddle with them. And because he was nervous, so he broke them. Okay. So he had to go back to the rectory to get a spare pair. But when he got there, he had forgotten his key, so he had to climb to the second story to get into the house and had scratched his hands climbing the brick building. Who the fuck fell for that?
The cops. Everybody.
So, slight backtrack. We're going to skip back 3 weeks in time. 3 weeks before Irene's death, another woman was sexually assaulted while kneeling at the communion rail in another Catholic church nearby. I mean, if you can't be safe there. Mm-hmm. Feit was charged but denied it, and eventually it resulted in a hung jury. So in 1962, he pled no contest to aggravated assault, which was a lesser charge, and paid a $500 fine rather than face a second trial. Later, he claimed he didn't understand that pleading no contest was considered a conviction.
Right, because you're not saying you didn't do it. You're not contesting it.
Yeah.
But you're not saying guilty.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So, Feit was sent to Assumption Abbey, which is a Trappist monastery in Missouri, which incidentally is famous for their fruitcake.
Great. I don't have a strong opinion on fruitcake. I really haven't had that much in my life.
I love fruitcake. Good fruitcake. Because my mama taught me how to make it right.
Okay.
And my grandma taught me to soak it in rum. That's how you make a fruitcake. Anyway. So, at the monastery, a monk named Dale Tacheny, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, Tacheny.
Listen, I'm doing First Nations next.
All right. So, a monk named Dale Tacheny was told, this is where I just start shaking my head and wanting to hit somebody. He was told that Feit had killed someone, and that Tacheny was instructed to counsel Feit and determined if he had the disposition to become a monk. Tacheny later said Feit confessed to hurting one woman and killing another, but this confession went unreported for decades. Fuck years. Decades. It went unreported. So not surprisingly, at least to me, Feit was not a good fit for the monastic life.
No shit.
He was sent next to Jemez Springs, New Mexico, to a treatment center for troubled priests run by the servants of the Paraclete. So he joined the center as a staff member and was able to work his way into a supervisory position. So why do we care about his career? Well, we don't. I wish someone had kicked him in the throat. But while he was there, Father James Porter was sent to the center after he began molesting children in the 1960s. Some people might be familiar with Father James Porter. Fight cleared him for placement in another parish.
Of course.
Because of course. While piece of shit Porter, that is my personal nickname for him, was later defrocked, he was convicted of molesting 28 children of both sexes, but confessed to molesting at least 100.
Mm-hmm.
And Fight just merrily sent him back.
But and all you have to do, you did your confessional, so you didn't do anything wrong anymore because you confessed.
Yeah. So, Fight, in the meantime, left the priesthood in the 70s, married, and had 3 children. Isn't that sweet?
Nope.
So, in 2002, 40 flippin' years later, Tashani contacted authorities in San Antonio, because he believed that was where Fight was from, to report what Fight had confessed to him. 40 years. 40.
What was the point?
So another priest, Father Joseph O'Brien, who had worked with Fight at the time of the murder, came forward at that point in time and said that Fight had also confessed to him. Now, he had originally said no, but now he's changed his mind.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing. They went back and talked to the polygraph examiner and re-questioned him about the results, and he said Fight's original polygraph was labeled inconclusive, but the examiner said he'd always felt Fight failed the test.
Okay. Maybe if one man would voice something in less than 40 fucking years, then people wouldn't get murdered and raped.
Yeah. Thank God someone with a penis decided to step in and make things right. So this went to the grand jury in 2004, and they declined to indict. Partly, I believe, because, please note, neither Fight, O'Brien, nor Tashani were subpoenaed to testify before the grand jury. So I'm like, what'd they do?
So who did anything?
As a matter of fact, my next question is, what kind of masturbatory effort was this? Sometimes you just got to say what you think. So, 2014. The campaign for district attorney was heating up, and contender Ricardo Rodriguez made Irene's case a campaign issue, arguing that if he was elected, he would get justice for her family. So he won, and the case was reopened. I will say he kept his word, because he was offered the opportunity to become a special investigator if he wouldn't pursue the position. And he said, no, I'm going to win, and then I'm going to open it up.
Okay.
So he did. It was reopened in 2015. Fight was arrested in 2016 at the age of 83 with kidney and bladder cancer. I'm like, that was not enough. He should have had like 4 or 5 more.
Mm-hmm.
In 2017, Tashani testified again, and finally, in December of that year, Fight was convicted. He died in prison of natural causes in February of 2020, which is way too easy.
I hope it was painful.
I hope so too, and slow and lingering.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go back. I wanted to circle back because it just infuriated me. To that center in Jemez Springs, New Mexico, run by the Servants of the Paraclete. So it is a Latin church, Catholic religious congregation of men dedicated to ministry to priests and brothers with personal difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
It was, now I will say the guy who founded it had a lot going for him. It was founded in 1947 by Father Gerald Fitzgerald, because he had a vision of a religious community whose mission was to minister to priests and members of other religious orders who were suffering from issues like alcohol abuse and substance abuse. Because he was inspired, wherever he was working, a transient showed up on his doorstep seeking help, and he helped this man. And as the man was leaving, he said, I used to be a priest.
Huh?
So, he wanted to help. So the land was purchased in Jemez Springs. And the one thing he had against him, Fitzgerald was a strong proponent of spiritual treatment and did not believe in any kind of psychological counseling or AA. Although his initial goal was to help priests with substance abuse problems, he soon was being referred pedophiles, and he wanted to refuse them and was not allowed. He tried to treat them with the same spiritual methods, but found they didn't work. Kills the prees.
Yeah.
So he founded this in 1947. In 1948, 1 year, he tried to refuse accepting priests with abnormalities of sex, but had to continue to accept and treat them. So in 1974, Fitzgerald has been interviewed a lot about this. He said that when he started the center, 80% of the problems referred to them were alcoholism. Now it was about 50% alcoholism, 20% what he called heart cases, which means they were attracted to women.
Okay.
And 30% were aberrations involving homosexuality.
Okay, but were they, or was it what they were referring to as homosexuality, which was anything aberrant?
That wasn't clear. So but here's the thing. He believed that these priests could not be cured and that they should be laicized, which I had to look up. Mm-hmm. It means removed from the clerical state, even if it meant you had to do it against their will. He was like, they need to be stripped of their position. He did not advocate punishing them, but he said they need to be stripped of their position and they should never be returned to parishes. And they
because they have control over other people.
And they cannot be allowed any contact with children whatsoever. He said this over and over and over again. He didn't think they should be returned to parishes. He actually refused to write recommendations for anyone with those problems. And some bishops listened to him and some just ignored him. Of course. So he tried repeatedly to convince the bishops in the U.S. and Vatican officials. He actually had an audience with one of the popes, that sexual abusers could not be cured and should be laicized immediately. There are documented letters as early as 1952. He met with Pope Paul VI in 1963.
Yeah, it's actually pretty impressive because it wasn't until really like profiling and all of that started that they really started understanding that there were people who could not be rehabilitated because these urges would always be there.
I don't know what it was about this man, but he recognized that.
Yeah.
And he campaigned for this. He was forced out of his leadership role because of it.
Yep.
So his successors all supported secular, psychiatric and psychological treatments, which was an issue he would not bend on. So the Servants of the Paraclete Center in Hemis Springs became the first facility in the world specifically training sexual disorders of clergy.
Great.
Yeah, so his advice was completely ignored. It was not unusual for treatment plans, diagnoses, progress reports, anything documenting this. If it was sent to someone, like if it was sent to another parish, those reports all had to be returned. They destroyed them. You can return these to us or you can destroy them. You have to burn them, shred them. They have to be completely destroyed. Even though they knew the harm they had done and were likely to continue to do.
Mm-hmm. What I've never been able to understand is why the church why it was better to them to cover it up, cover everything up and let it continue, not even try and dissuade it in any way, than to admit that there was a problem with a few.
Yeah.
And now they don't understand why this is seen as such a huge issue and why it's associated with them.
Because they did. Yeah, it's obvious to us now. It's because you allowed it. You encouraged it in some cases.
But there's so much of this in religion, period. It's the don't acknowledge there is a problem. Mm-hmm. When I posted about stuff lately, and all these people come on and say they have had the same issue with people who are of a certain religious ilk or whatever. And what those people then who are in that same group do is come on and say, well, that's not what our religion is about. And I'm like, but it exists in your religion, and read all these people on my page who are having the same issues with this. Stop saying it's not what it is and start saying, how do we fix it?
Exactly.
And that's what they still don't. It doesn't matter. That's what drives me nuts about organized religion. So there's my rant. I have a lot more to say, but I'm not gonna.
You're going to rant more later.
Yes, I am.
In the 1990s, after a series of lawsuits, and this is a quote right off of Wikipedia, because I was like, this says exactly what I want to say, and there's no way for me to paraphrase it or interweave it with other information. So in the 1990s, after a series of lawsuits related to sexually abusive priests that had been treated at its facilities, the order closed most of their centers. They have since consolidated their holistic programs into Missouri and Gloucester. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. England. In 1998, the British facility ended its ministry to priests who had committed sexual abuse. The Servants of the Paraclete also sponsor a long-term residential facility for priests and religious brothers at the Vianney Renewal Center in Ditmer, Missouri, where the primary emphasis is on community living. But this is why I included this. This Missouri Sex Offenders Registry shows 6 sex offenders living at the Ditmer address of the Vianney Renewal Center as of March 19th, 2019.
Okay. Gotcha.
So I'm all for community living. I don't want sex offenders living in my community.
That's the problem, isn't it, though? Always with like a halfway house or anything like that. It's great. Yes, you're absolutely right that this should be a thing because it gets you.
No, if you're a child abuser,
but but not in my neighborhood.
I don't have any compassion or mercy.
No, not for child molestation.
No, I'm like, you should live in a hole in the ground. You should live in a cave, a damp, cold cave, full of bitey things.
Full of snake balls.
Yes. So after reading about this, and I can't even remember how I stumbled across this about poor Irene Garza to begin with. After reading about all the secrecy and the blatant back-turning to all the warnings and all the really good advice, the surprise to me was not that it took 40 plus years, for her family to receive justice. The miracle is that anyone spoke out at all.
Yes.
And I'm like, why? Why wait 40 years? And I understand, in a way, I understand the sacred bounds of confession. Mm-hmm. You don't repeat what you hear in confession. I get that. But when someone says they hurt one woman and killed another, his confession is more important than justice.
Than lives?
Than lives. Did he ever kill again? Will we ever know?
Not unless he confessed and that person comes out 40 years later and says it.
And I mean, did his wife know when he left the priesthood and got married and had children? Did his children know? And how do you justify that? Inflicting that on your own children? Oh, well, yes, but I was a priest, so it was okay.
The church said I could do it.
Yeah, the church said it was okay, and they gave me a promotion. They sent me to,
and then they let me decide about other people. Yeah, so that's what you do.
Here's a list of the people that I let go back and molest children some more.
It's a good thing that I know some priests, pastors, and such in real life.
Yes.
Just as with anything else, it's always good to be able to see the good people who do it.
Yes.
Because it makes you not lump them all together, but sometimes it's really fucking hard.
It is.
Especially when the higher-ups in that, we'll call it, organization, have allowed it to happen and allowed such rampant abuse of children and women.
Why is it okay? Why is no abuse is okay, but why is abusing children? Why for so long was that okay?
I don't know.
It makes no sense to me. As a human being.
You can't have sex with a woman, so this is okay. Because it was never... When you live by a book, mm-hmm. if something is not explicitly stated in it, and other things are, I guess you can justify anything that's not written in the book. How about that?
Okay.
Okay.
So let's go on to your enlightening topic.
Okay.
Your lighthearted romp through.
So before I jump into it, I did want to address something just so people are aware. And it finally made it into CNN, which is nice. Because the first day when the news broke, it was in like one tiny little paper that I could find online. Because people don't give a shit. The residential schools in Canada, mm-hmm. that children were often forcibly taken from their parents and put in, sometimes at gunpoint, sometimes kidnapped, while they're in their front yard. So the parents didn't even know where they'd been taken. They had these residential schools. They had them here in America too, but Canada seemed to have a bigger problem with it. Anyway, there's one that's called Kamloops. Mm-hmm. And it's this old Indian reservation school. It's now used as a community center. The building still stands. And they have discovered 215 children, a mass grave outside this old residential school. These are children that the parents who never got their children back have been saying something happened to them all along and they were ignored. And believe me, there have to be bodies outside of their schools too. Uh-huh. They just haven't found them yet. 215 children. The youngest was 3. And the thing is, Indian country's been hit by this really hard. Everybody, it doesn't matter if you're a First Nations or Native American or what, it's hurting all of Indian country for people. Just so you know, if you've got somebody in that community, they might be really bothered by this. But it's a reminder that nobody gives a shit. Because believe me, it's not going to be in the news next week at all. Nobody cares. Nothing will be done about it. Nobody will be punished. And so this school did start out Catholic, then the government took over. So they're both at fault. But they have been saying, my child never came home. These children, their stories coming out now. So it is actually acting as a very healing thing in the communities too, because people who went to these residential schools, and there were multiple generations, they were open for decades. Their parents are finally spilling what they dealt with, but there was a lot of rape. There was a lot of abuse. And some of the kids just thought that these kids that they got taken out of the room at night or whatever, and they never got brought back. They thought maybe they'd run away. Maybe they'd made it. Maybe they were somewhere better. And no, whatever they did killed the child. They were also doing secret testing, government testing on children in these residential schools. They would adopt some of them out to white parents and they never went home. But yeah, quite a few just didn't go home because they were murdered or they were abused into death.
Or neglected.
So, yes, absolutely. There was malnutrition was rampant. Things like tuberculosis hit and then went through everybody because there was no medical care. So anyway, that's what's hit. It's the 215. It's Kamloops School. So if you see anybody posting about that, if anybody's talking about that, the 215, that's what it's about. So that's hit Indian country. And I'm going to be covering something that people may have heard of. It's the Highway of Tears in Canada. And this is an infamous highway. It comes up a lot in the MMIW, the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women movements, because a high rate of women disappear along the highway, most of them Indigenous. So my sources were highwayoftears.org, missingpeople.ca, the Canadian Encyclopedia, Wikipedia, cbc.ca, Maclean's Magazine Archive, Justice for Native Women, Taken the Podcast, and Prince George Free Press. So I'm going to start with a little background, and then I'm going to tell 3 short stories about 3 different situations that happen. Directly quoted from the Highway of Tears website, I'm going to start with, from 1989 to 2006, 9 young women went missing or were found murdered along the 724-kilometer length of the Highway 16, now commonly referred to as the Highway of Tears. All but one of these victims were Aboriginal women. The RCMP has created a project called Project E-PANA, that's E-PANA, as of 2005. In 2007, they expanded the Highway of Tears to include Highways 97 and 5. This officially increased the number of women missing or murdered along this stretch of highway to 18, 10 of those being Aboriginal women, and expanded the time frame to between 1969 and 2006. Many in northern British Columbia consider the number of missing and murdered women to be over 30. A Highway of Tears symposium occurred in 2006, ending with 33 recommendations for action items to help with the issues related to this. And as they said on their website, each of these recommendations come first from the understanding that the communities along the highway share a situation of colonization, resulting in experiences of poverty, violence, cultural genocide, residential school impacts, addictions, and displacement from land. So a lot of people like to say, I've been told this to my face quite a few times, that Native Americans, First Nations, they do it to themselves. Well, if they weren't getting drunk, that's the big one. And guess what? That may be partially true, some of it, but there's a reason that they've reached a point where that's a problem. Because they live in this permanent state state that they were put into, the people who took their land, and then decided they wanted to change them. Those residential schools were to take the children away and strip every bit of their culture and heritage from them. They forced them to cut their hair, which for many is a religious thing. And they made them dress like they were white, and they weren't allowed to talk their native tongue. So a lot of people have almost fully lost their native languages in the countries that they still live in, that they never moved out of. So anyway, a little sensitive about these things. So this whole thing's going to go like this. In 2015, the federal government launched an investigation. 2015, it took that long. Into the Highway of Tears disappearances and murders, considering it a small portion of the larger national issue involving missing and murdered Indigenous women and a concern shared with the U.S. The portion of Yellowhead Highway, which is what Highway 16 is also called, involved in the Highway of Tears runs from Prince Rupert on the northwest coast of British Columbia to Prince George in the central interior, and at some point it's run to Alberta. 23 First Nations border the highway. So 23 reserves, with poverty running rampant. A lack of public transportation has continued the dangerous act of hitchhiking as a main form of transit for those living along the highway. This is why they walk along the highway and hitchhike. They don't have cars, many of them, and they don't have bus service. Human Rights Watch has declared British Columbia as having the highest rate of unsolved murders of Indigenous women and girls in Canada overall. Carolyn Bennett, the Federal Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations Canada, says the number of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls in Canada is over 1,200. There have been some arrests and convictions made in cases in the area, with several serial killers having been active in the area, such as Bobby Jack Fowler and Edward Dennis Isaac. So I'm not going to talk about any of those victims. I may talk about these guys later. So I put them on my list. The RCMP have reported that since the creation of ePANA, they have collected 750 DNA samples, conducted 2,500 interviews, investigated 1,413 persons of interest, so 1,413 persons of interest, and administered 100 polygraphs. That was from missingpeople.ca for those stats. An ex-RCMP officer turned private investigator named Ray Machalko has set out on a mission to solve the Highway of Tears cases and is spending his own money to speak with families of the victims, to do deeper investigations and travel along the Highway of Tears to try and find answers. In 2017, BC Transit, so that would be British Columbia Transit, added 3 new bus routes that service areas along the Highway of Tears. But in 2018, Greyhound announced they would be removing services of routes in the area. Go Greyhound. Which basically neutralizes that improvement when they added new bus services there. The last update said the Minister of Transportation for the province would work on making up for the service disruption. I did not see if they did. That was 2018. Having set that background, I'm going to cover the 3 stories briefly that have occurred in British Columbia. I skipped a lot of them. A ton of the case, I read through every single case on the Highway of Tears site on Wikipedia. Anybody can look at that list. Some of them are officially in that ePANA that the RCMP is doing. Others are just women that disappear, involving that general area. I read through all of them to pick the 3 stories. There's a ton of them that are, she disappeared and then her body turned up on the highway. And she was strangled, raped, beaten, stabbed, whatever. So I didn't choose those ones. It would have been just picking from a potluck. The first story involves the disappearance of Jean Virginia Sampere, who went by Jenny, so that's what I'll call her. She was born September 10th, 1953, the second youngest of 6 kids. She worked at a cannery and helped care for her siblings. So when she was out of school, she worked at the cannery. Her father did drink too much, and she was known to protect her siblings, even though she was little. On the evening of October 14th, 1971, in Gitsigukla, BC, British Columbia, I'm going to call it BC from now on, Jenny's sister-in-law said she rushed out of the house battling tears. The sister-in-law's name was Violet. She didn't know the reason. She thought there'd been an argument between Jenny and her mom, because it was her mom's house. Jenny went to her cousin Alvin's house. They hung out above the Gitsigukla River on a railroad bridge. Jenny decided to head to a nearby store, Alvin thought, and he rode his bike home really quick to grab his jacket. She had forgotten hers at home, but he went back to grab his, and when he started coming back, he heard a truck door slam and a truck take off, and by the time he got to where he had a visual, his cousin, her bike, gone. She was never seen again. Police and community members, and I believe she was 18, police and community members searched the area for 8 days, but she was never seen again. In 1985, the RCMP closed the case, stating that the Gitsigukla Band chief counselor had reported in 1971 that Jenny had drowned. This was based on someone saying they saw footprints leading into the river and it must have been Jenny's. But as there was no conclusive evidence for this, and in fact, the family stated it's stone around.
Yeah.
And you can't tell us that for sure those were her footprints. So the family did complain to the RCMP and file, and then they reopened the case for all the good it was going to do.
That's bullshit.
Yeah, well, it's a pattern. Of interest is the fact that Jenny's boyfriend had disappeared before her disappearance, and his body did turn up after her disappearance, and he had drowned in a different river, and I forget which river it was. It wasn't the Gitsigukla. And there's no further conjecture, on was there something going? There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. I couldn't find anything further. Could it have been related to that? Was it a totally random kidnapping? I mean, how'd they get her bike? Anyway, along with Helen Claire Frost, who had disappeared 1 year previously on October 13th, so almost exactly a year earlier, and Monica Ignis, who disappeared a couple years later, Jenny was one of the first to disappear and bring attention to the Highway of Tears. And make people go, maybe there's an issue. And it is a truck route, just to put that out there too. On July 3rd, 1976, 21-year-old Corrine Thomas, who was days from her due date, she was 9 months pregnant, was walking along the road with friends trying to hitchhike home after a dance they'd attended. She was struck by a car driven by 21-year-old Richard Redekop. Both Corrine and her unborn child died. Multiple witnesses. This one made me really mad because I found an article published during it all, and the bias just sent me into a rage. But anyway, multiple witnesses said that they had seen Redekop's truck swerve to hit Corrine on the side of the road, and that he had purposely struck her. Redekop was white, just to be very clear. Corrine was indigenous. All the 3 stories I'm going to deal with different First Nations reserves. They recanted what they'd said about it being Redekop who swerved toward Corrine instead of saying that Corrine had jumped out in front of the truck. So police questioned these minors without any adults present for 3 hours. And when they came out, they were saying that she had actually, this 9-month pregnant girl, just to be very clear, at 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that, had jumped out in front of the car. So I just... Because, we all know how spry 9-month pregnant women are. Especially
energetic.
One that was probably very teeny.
Yeah.
They would later state they'd been coerced by the police and forced to say this, and during the public formal inquiry, all witnesses said the truck had swerved to hit her. Just to be clear on that, too. The coroner at the time, Eric Turner, all this is going to blow your mind, you ready? Felt the death had been an accident and that there was no need for an actual inquest. However, surrounding press started catching on to this. Okay?
Jesus.
And it comes out that he himself had been let off with a lesser charge in a hit and run where he, while drunk, hit and killed an indigenous man 10 years earlier. It also came to light that he had presided over the inquest of Richard Redekop's younger brother, Stanley Redekop, when he had hit and killed Larry Thomas, Corrine's cousin, on that very same road 2 years before, and said that it also must have been an accident. Okay? So,
That stinks.
then press outside the town started publishing unflattering stories about the treatment of natives in town.
Well, no
Because
shit.
the natives are complaining the local RCMP doesn't do anything about the abuses, that there are many abuses happening in the town. And then Sophie Thomas, who was a former chief of the reserve and also happened to be the aunt of both Thomas and, both Thomas kids, she submitted a written request to do the official inquiry. And so he did end up setting the inquest up for September 25th, making a public statement that, quote, "I will not let it be turned into a political forum for outsiders to come and air their complaints about race relations." When those same outside press sources revealed the information that I've already stated about his past case in the previous inquest, he did remove himself from the case, and then Coroner Glenn McDonald came in from Vancouver. Indigenous citizens came forward to say the local whites playing chicken with natives walking along the road is common, and that there are other abuses happening. And local white citizens claimed, no, the Indians frequently run out in front of our cars. so that they can get us to stop and give them rides. The coroner, Turner, was one of those making those public statements about this, which I feel was incredibly ballsy considering he fucking killed one when he was drunk. Citizens of both races stated to reporters that the town of Vanderhoof, where this occurred, is one of the most racially prejudiced towns in British Columbia. It's a white logging community abutting a reserve. So, redneck.
Yep.
And, yeah. While I didn't find a follow-up article, Wikipedia reported that the Crown opted to not proceed with charges ultimately, even after the other guy came in. They recommended against it. In June 1977, Kareen's dad filed criminal negligence charges, which a private citizen in Canada can file, and the charges were dismissed for insufficient evidence. Everybody knows he hit her. He's admitted that he hit her, but there's insufficient evidence. So, I don't believe, in case this is a surprise to anybody or unclear, for a second that a 9-month pregnant girl leapt out in front of a truck.
No.
I don't care how bad she wanted a ride. She couldn't have moved fast enough. Probably, my theory is that he was doing the chicken thing. Maybe he didn't see she was pregnant or he was just a dumb shit. But he expected her to get out of the way and she couldn't. So that's just purely mine.
I don't believe the native people run into the road in front of the
highway to stop people.
Bitch.
Or like one did it and they all used it like as the see he did it.
No.
Yeah. So what truly bothered me was the tone that came across in the article Two Bitter Solitudes, published in Maclean's magazine September 20th, 1976, while the case was still raging. It was published by Judith Timpson. One of the things that gets me is I feel like she thought she was being unbiased.
Oh.
And even-handed, and she wasn't. No one in that family, the Redicop family, expressed any sort of remorse for her death. At all, of a young pregnant woman. They admit that their sons are, in the mother's words, quote, scrappers, and that they, quote, walk around with their fists up, but say there's no way they would do anything like this on purpose. The only thing Richard Redicop, the one who hit her, was quoted on was saying the accident would, quote, look bad after what had happened with his brother and her cousin 2 years earlier. So the younger brother was 17 when he killed the cousin. They didn't give an age for the cousin. The reporter only spoke to the Redicop family, not the Thomas family. Spoke to all of them, represented how ill-treated they were feeling.
Well, tough fucking shit.
Yeah. So the killer's family got to have their say. The victim's family didn't. The only one who was quoted was that Sophie Thomas, the previous chief, and that's because she made public statements. The Redicops were deeply upset that natives were driving past their house and yelling murderer. So that must have been very hurtful and hard for them.
Gosh.
To wrap this story up, well, you know what? Here's what I didn't put in there. The same day that Redicop hit her, his sister, who had been in the hospital for a week due to an actual car accident, died. So the same night he killed this girl, his sister died in the hospital. And the mother said, who would think that my son, while standing over his sister on her deathbed, could then go out and purposely kill somebody? And I thought, depends. Why is nobody investigating? There's nothing about her accident. Was it with a native person? Is there a reason he could have been holding
a grudge?
Just really the coincidence of both brothers having killed cousins on the same highway. It's mind-blowing.
It's not. No.
But
it's not coincidence.
Here's just a nice wrap-up. It's not like it could have an happy ending. The baby was removed during the autopsy, and the Thomas family buried Corrine with her baby boy in her arms. Okay. The final story involves not one woman, but an entire family that went missing. Only the mother, Doreen Jack, is listed on the MMIW and Highway of Tears list because those are concerning the crimes against women. But, it was a whole family. It was her and her 2 little boys and her husband. On August 1st, 1989, Doreen's husband Ronald met a white man who was never named at the First Leader pub in Prince George, British Columbia. The man told Ronald that he had a job at a nearby logging camp for both Ronald and Doreen. They were 26 years old. She would have been the cook and he would have been doing logging with other men. They were both desperate for income as they left the Burns Lake Reserve and moved to Prince George for a better life, but then couldn't find any jobs. Here's the thing that people don't understand too, is about Native people trying to get off reserves. Nobody will hire them. So how do you find a way to live off of the reserves? So maybe solve that fucking problem before you make stupid comments. Originally, the couple intended to leave their 2 sons with family and move to the camp temporarily to make some money, but they were unable to find someone on such short notice. When Ronald contacted the man, he was told there was childcare available at the logging camp. Tell me if that's ever been true. But he was desperate to believe, so they packed up their family, and Ronald called his mom at 1:30 in the morning and said, we're heading out. Right, in a couple hours.
Oh my God.
We're going to be gone 10 to 14 days because school was starting for their oldest son, who was 9. The youngest was 4. Russell was about to start school. And so they wanted to be back in time for that. He did tell her that the logging camp was supposed to be around Cluckolt's Lake. I don't know how to say it. They left then early in the morning hours of August 2nd. So he met the guy at the bar, and they were gone by the next morning. The family never returned home and were reported missing August 25th. When the mom was just like, okay, they should have been home. And she lived back on the reserve. She wasn't near there. It's been stated that the family did not own a car. So the mystery man most likely picked up the family. That's why, because I was like, I kept looking because I was like, nobody says if they found their car anywhere. So that's weird. Well, they didn't have one. And it also explains why it was so fast. He was probably like, I'm going back to the logging camp in the morning so I can take you then and I'll have a job for you. Witnesses said Ronald left the bar with a white man who was 35 to 40 years old, had brownish red hair and a trim beard and mustache. He was wearing blue jeans and, like a work shirt and all of this. So your standard, what everybody would have looked like in all these logging areas. I did find an update. Here's the interesting thing. I found a Reddit and it had a bunch of links out that I hadn't found on my own. So August 3rd, 2018. Saying the RCMP had ramped up efforts again and were seeking an anonymous tipster who had given undisclosed information to a third party who had then contacted police. They felt at the time of the article that they could solve this crime if they could get the tipster to call them. I did find updates that said the tipster had called in from the Vanderhoof area. I just talked about that one over here, the logging area in that town, that awful, awful town. They had called from the Vanderhoof area and said, quote, the Jack family are buried at the south end of Gordy's ranch. So this call occurred 13 years after the family disappeared. Police did go to what they felt would be the Gordy. That was talked because there was somebody who was known. They could not find any bodies or evidence or anything like that. There was a party happening when they went over there. They talked to the people attending the party. People really want to know where this family went after all this time.
Well, and south end of the ranch
could mean a lot of things, or they could be wrong.
But I'm like, that's probably not a small area. How do you search for remains in a...
And like we talked before, ground penetrating radar, which is what they use with Kamloops, by the way, to look more thoroughly at the full mass grave once they found something. You can't just... It's not just I'm going to go over 30 acres with this. It's not how it works. You have to have an idea of where you're looking and what you're looking for.
And it's not cheap.
So it's very interesting. And it's in the case of another guy who was accused of a different crime, he came out and said something about, well, I know this guy and he killed the Jack family. Like, people were aware decades later of the Jack family's disappearance because it's a whole family. That is not typical. And they just, their stuff was still at their house. They'd taken just enough to be gone for that 2 weeks. And the mother never heard from them. It was interesting on the Reddit. There was a thing where somebody claimed that they'd called in and talked to the RCMP, and then that wasn't true. So then it got opened back up again. So these are only a few examples of disappearances of Indigenous women in British Columbia. Again, there's a full listing on that Wikipedia page. There's highwayoftears.org, I think it is, that you can look at that has a smaller list than Wikipedia because it's more focused on direct related to the highway. The vast majority are unsolved disappearances or deaths. Many of them involve prostitutes because that's where they're getting work, is at the hotels along the highways. Again, a lot of the truckers. The only thing tying them together is the fact that the women disappeared, were murdered, or their bodies were dumped on the 3 highways, making up the current Highway of Tears. So, like I said earlier, I'll be covering 2 of those serial killers, Bobby Jack Fowler and the other guy, in the future, as well as some crimes targeting Indigenous males in Canada and the U.S., but I'm trying to spread it all out. So it's not like a constant.
Right.
So it'll be further in the future, but it's on my list because there's some horrifying stuff going on and it doesn't get covered. Finding this information was hard. Except for the cases, the ones that just have the bare information at the top of it that cover the entirety of the Highway of Tears stuff. Because the press doesn't cover it. And I said that in the last one. The U.S. press doesn't cover it, and neither does the Canadian press. This Kamloops school did hit CNN, and I was like, ooh, finally, but that'll be it. They won't follow up on it. They never do. It's going to disappear, and nobody's going to remember, and really nobody knows, because I didn't see anybody talking about it who wasn't following the native press that I follow.
I know that in one of the mother-baby homes in Ireland, similar thing happened in that behind at least one of them, there's a mass grave.
Yep.
And they're finding there's no accounting for it. These people were thrown away. How do you throw away a human being? It doesn't make sense to me. And how can you
because they were lesser human beings to the people doing it.
How can you claim to be a religious person? How can you claim, your purpose in life is to live this decent, good life and help people, and yet you can throw people away? Those two don't go together, and it makes my head hurt really badly.
Yeah, it's something that I've tried to understand. I mean, that's part of why I study serial killers and stuff, is I always come from the psychological viewpoint, and how can it happen, and how can you stop it, right?
Right.
But I look at stuff like that too, and the way that one group of people can dehumanize another group of people is absolutely mind-blowing to me. I mean, I can't even do that to animals and think, they don't feel pain, the way so many people seem to think about animals. But there's people that well and truly think that people of a different race, for example, aren't fully human, don't feel things the same way they do. Well, they don't feel pain like we do.
Well, and there are states right now, as we speak, in the U.S., that are trying to turn women into these. Yep. They're not fully human. They are too stupid to have control
over their own bodies.
Over their own lives.
But you try and control a man's body, and that shit gets shut down real fast.
Yeah, because you know what? Women don't just wake up one morning and go, oh gosh, I'm pregnant. That seed has to come from somewhere. Why don't we control it at the source?
No, it's not going to happen.
Why don't we make men account for every place they've dropped one? A single sperm. I want to know where every single one went.
Yeah. Every woman has to know. I was reading I always end up on side roads, but that the highwayoftears.org also was covering just in general other crimes against Indigenous women, I believe, in British Columbia that had no association with the highways at all. And they were covering this case of a prostitute. I actually almost talked about it, but since it wasn't more specific to it, I didn't. And it was an update on a case where they're reopening and recharging a man. And it was a guy who had stopped at a motel, and he had hired a prostitute, and she was Indigenous. And she died in that hotel room in the bathtub because she bled to death from what did they say, 12 centimeter slice in her cervix or her vagina. She bled to death from that. Like, how long did she have to be bleeding to bleed to death from that? And he said, well, she consented, and I was using my entire fist, for example, but the coroner said a sharp implement, a foreign object, was used to do this. And he still says it was just his fist was probably the worst thing that went in there. So he hired her for 2 days. And the second day, she died. The reason they're retrying it, this is why this came up from that, is that in the first case, they have a law. See, if I'd written it down, I'd know what it was called. They have a specific thing in Canada that does not allow you to introduce a woman's sexual history in cases of rape or sexual violence.
All right, that makes sense.
Because she was hired, so you can't really call it rape, but did she consent to all the things he did? We don't know. But they introduced it, and the judge allowed it. And so all of this was bad. The defense should not have been allowed to introduce it. The judge should not have allowed it. So the jury heard about her sexual history. Well, she was a fucking prostitute. There was history. And so he didn't get in trouble for her death. So they are reopening it, but it's going to be at a lesser charge. So it won't be murder in the first like it was before, like their version of that. It's going to be like negligent homicide or something like that or whatever. But yeah, so but because they actually, we don't have that law here as far as I know. You can walk out a woman's sexual past as much as you want to if she's accusing somebody of rape, and it will be held against her. Now, the judge may decide this isn't admissible. I don't feel it has something to do with that, but it takes this old white man to have that conscience to do it. Mm-hmm. So it would be really nice if we would institute something like that here, because I don't care if she has had sex with everybody in 5 schools before it happens. It doesn't mean that the one who did it without her consent was okay.
Yeah.
So it's just there's
consent
so much.
is consent.
Yes.
And I highly doubt somebody would say, yes, hurt me and kill me.
Yes. But on this continent, because Canada is very much guilty of the same things that are happening down here, Indigenous women are considered less than. And therefore, they are seen as less than when it comes to investigating the crimes and prosecuting the crimes. So all these things that are done to them are done by people who don't view them as human beings most of the time.
It's just like if you want pain pills, if you are injured or you've had some kind of surgery, you best be a white man, because that's who gets the most medication.
Oh my God.
Because nobody
that
else,
one I could go off on forever.
Nobody else feels pain quite like the delicate sensibilities of a white man.
Well, except then the doctors, well, you just are very sensitive to pain, is what I was told over and over. Like, it's a joke between my husband and I. He can go in and have kind of a sniffle, and he'll come home with Vicodin, prescription antibiotics, prescription nose spray, and prescription whatever that Sudafed would do. I have gone in after I had H1N1 that triggered the autoimmune that I have. It also caused a lot of internal damage. And so I would get, if I got the slightest cold, I would end up with bronchitis, laryngitis, an ear infection, and a sinus infection. So it was my unholy quad, and I got it every single time. And I could go in, and here's the thing, I don't go to the doctor until I'm dying. So I would have had it for 2 months or something by the time I went in, and just be completely unable to function, on the verge of pneumonia. And they would go, okay, so go home and take some Sudafed and do a nasal wash. That's literally what I walked out of those offices with.
That's insane.
And so it got to the point where, like, Jeff would come home with something, and he's like, don't look at what they gave me. He fully recognized that there was this bizarre double standard, and I could go in and be dying, and they're like, you're fine.
Well, we probably should let our listeners go.
We need to give them our question.
If they're still here. Yes.
I know. You might have stopped listening. That's fine. This is actually fairly short as they go recently.
But we have a good question. Can I read the question this time?
Do it.
Can I?
Oh my God, do it.
What was the first book that you felt like opened your eyes to something new? So I don't mean like what's the first book you ever remember reading. I mean, because a lot of us grew up reading a whole bunch of different stuff. For me, I have an answer for this one.
Okay.
For me, it would have been, and not that I love the author or I love the book to this day, but it was probably the first science fiction-ish that I read. It was Stranger in a Strange Land.
Oh, yeah.
By, what's his butt?
Wow. It just went right out of my head, and I know exactly who wrote it.
It's
Heinlein.
Was it Heinlein? Robert, yeah.
Yeah, okay, there we go.
Heinlein.
Hey, didn't he have a house here?
I don't.
Was it Heinlein that had a house here? And it was
have.
like a really cool one, and he had it designed.
But anyway, that was the first book I remember. Somebody I rode the bus with, who was like 2 grades ahead of me, was reading that for English class, probably English, maybe social studies, I don't know. But I picked it up, and she would let me read it. I read it on the bus every day, back and forth, until I finished it. That, and the other book that made a big impact on me was The Princess Bride. Not for the reasons anybody thinks. Well, because everybody just loves the romance. And to me, it was the format. It was the story within the story.
Yeah.
And the grandfather and the little interjections. I did enjoy the story, but
it was different.
It was different. And it was playful, and it turned storytelling. It was storytelling in a completely different way. Stranger in a Strange Land was, what the fuck? Where did this, what? And I grok things, and that was the big saying, I grok.
Yeah.
And I just, so that, yeah, those two.
I don't know. Off the top of my head, I would say The Secret Garden.
Oh,
I remember made an impact on me. My godmother had gotten it for me, I believe. Mm-hmm. So, and just, I mean, to this day, I'm all about a secret passageway. But it was a very different world. It was this British girl who'd grown up in India, which was a colony, you know, and so I don't know. I'm afraid to read it now. It might be super racist. I have no idea. I don't think I've heard it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But her parents die and she gets sent to this uncle's house, and then there's a secret boy hidden there. I mean, there was a secret boy and a secret garden and secret passages, and, you know, everything was secret in it. And for a preteen girl reading this, I was like, my God, what other secrets might there be? And that was where I first heard about the Moors. Which until I watched one of the Daniel Craig James Bond movies, the Moors were always whatever image I had in my head. And what's funny about that is they must have been so well described because they're in so many books, right?
Yes.
That there's Sherlock this scene Holmes in the Daniel Craig movie, and I went, my God, that's a Moor. And it was, because then they say the Moors, and I was like, oh my God, it is a Moor, and I've seen one now. So I was so excited.
That is hilarious.
Yes. And then I picked up for like a nickel at a garage sale a book about Hiroshima.
Oh.
And that one was insanely impactful. I will always remember the visuals in that of somebody of skin peeling off like a glove.
Oh.
Just, you know, and the permanent shadows and all of that. I was pretty young when I found that and got, because I was like, I want to know. Like, I'd heard the word, but I hadn't learned about it yet or anything. That one was massively impactful. It will always be, and I wish I still had it. I mean, it was falling apart, little paperback.
Right.
So eventually I probably just turned around and resold it at a garage sale because my parents did that. I don't do those. I hate garage sales with because people will come and dicker with you for something that meant something to you and go, why is this a dime? Can I pay you a nickel? Like, I never dickered. That's the ending to this. I didn't dickle either.
I love a garage sale.
I just went, here is the money you asked for.
But you wouldn't enjoy going to them either.
Nope.
You just, no.
Nope.
No. I do. Because you never know what treasures you
I did love finding books at them because they were books you couldn't find anywhere else.
I did.
But I haven't seen a lot of books at them. Like, when they were in the neighborhood and I kind of looked around, like we'd drive by and I'd be like, is there anything I want to go look at? No, the answer to that is no. I would do it. I'm sure I could find some amazing things, but I don't like it.
My neighbors across the street had one last weekend. I don't know. And I looked out and I was like, I am just totally not motivated enough to put pants on and shoes and walk across the street and say, hey, I just was like, I don't feel like being friendly and I don't feel like looking at the shit they're trying to get rid of.
That's the thing. You have to interact with people. I won't go near a stand of any kind with people. Like, it's horrifying being on the author side of that now and standing behind a table and you want them to buy and you're just trying to be friendly and not be pushy. Although the guys there are pushy as fuck all the time. But anyway, I won't be pushy. And not all the guys. But it is, I mean, I could sit here and name off people that I've been at these with who are all about pushing their book on somebody and they're going to aggressively try
I know
and sell
exactly
it.
who you're talking about.
Yes, and I just can't, I will never be able to do that.
Bob Spiller is not pushy. He will draw every person who walks by into a conversation.
Yes.
And it's not.
It's his personality. And again, I mentioned him. Was that this one or last one?
Yeah.
He has his Bonnie something.
Bonnie Pinkwater.
Bonnie Pinkwater mystery series.
And it's not. He doesn't draw people into a conversation and say bye bye book. He's just like, hey, and you could talk about anything in the world.
Yes.
But yes, I've been on the receiving end of some of those.
Yes, pitches. And I don't like it, and I'm never going to be that person, but then I'm not going to sell as many books as they do, because quite frankly, they sell them.
They do.
They have an edge. So. But anyway, these were both very serious and angry ones. I don't even know what to ask people to write us in about for their personal stories.
Tell us a ghost story, a nice...
Send us something funny.
Yes,
we're
please.
Both super bitchy right now, because these topics... Honestly, for me, it's because, like, I already was in a bad place, but I'd said I was going to cover it with the Kamloops School thing coming out. But it's hard not to read about these and get angry. Read about the Highway of Tears. Read about the shit that happens and tell me you don't get angry.
The book we talked about not last time, a couple of times ago, The Flower Moon.
Yes.
I can't.
Oh,
remember.
I tagged you. Did you see it? It is coming out as a movie. I tagged you from somebody's post that was public.
I did see that.
Yeah.
What is the whole title? Do you remember? Killers of the
Flower Moon. I don't know. I haven't read it.
Anyway, that it's hard to read that and not be. It's hard to read that and not be angry. And there are some books it's hard to read and not be ashamed to be a white person. Yeah. It's just like, I carry the guilt of my people. It's what I'm like, oh my God. I know I didn't do it, but I still feel the guilt and I still feel the anger. How can you treat? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to wind myself back up.
Don't do it. We laughed because I said Dickel.
That's like, what was it? Pew!
Oh my God, yeah, that episode. You guys still never heard the full one of that. Much hilarity and callbacks.
And what was it? There was one that one told me she laughed a lot at, and I can't. It might.
It was the maple syrup because I couldn't stop laughing because every next thing was like it was so serious.
Yeah. And you started it by telling me you didn't even like maple syrup.
I like me some high fructose corn syrup sugar.
Well,
with maple flavor.
And yet you criticize my orange juice.
Oh, but I fully acknowledge that it's not healthy. You were saying the orange juice was healthy. You know why that's a thing here? Because my husband kept buying orange juice for the kids. And we have one child who was overweight and one child who was underweight. And so every time I go to the doctor, I'm a bad mother for one reason or the other. And so every time I'm being told feed one more and feed one less. And basically, I absolutely abhor going in for their annual appointments.
Yep. It is so nice when they can start going in on their own.
Yeah, anyway, so he would get the orange juice. And that's one of the things that they like push on. Well, are you giving them juice and soda? And I'm like, they don't have soda, and they have juice. And so then I kept telling him, like, don't get the orange juice because it's actually pure sugar. Because blah, 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 blah. And then, so it's a thing. So orange juice is a thing for me.
Because I just wanted some vitamin C.
Oh my God. I was trying to be that kind of healthy. Yeah. I mean, good for you. But don't pretend.
It's not like I poured champagne in it.
Then it would be healthier. No, I'm just kidding.
I'll go home. Well, tomorrow morning
this is healthier.
I'm going to start with mimosas. If you have a good mimosa recipe,
send it in to mysteriesmonstersmayhem@gmail.com or your story, or submit your story on the forum at mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com. I didn't forget it in the middle this time, even though I just said the email that was the same.
Yeah, send us something to make us laugh. Please.
Send us stories and we'll read them on here. Okay, fine. Thank you for listening.
We'll see you.
Like, share, follow.
Yes, we'll see you next week.